The GT Omega Prime is as easy to build as aluminium profile cockpits get. Rock solid, marked at a price that's hard to criticise. There's nothing unnecessary or fussy about it, and is as good a choice as any if you're scouting around for a top line rig. Before we get into the review, it's important that you know that I received my Prime free of charge courtesy of GT Omega, and the 5% discount link that's provided in the description also earns me a commission if you buy through it. Rest assured, this doesn't actually have any bearing on what I tell you. I'm a sim racer first and foremost, and the Prime was already in my sights before I approached them for assistance. Other than supplying the equipment to make this video possible so quickly, GT Omega have completely left me to make up my mind. Thanks for understanding, and let's begin. Profile-based rigs are fairly standardised by now, and most of them are very similar in essence. Nowadays it basically boils down to which brand you like the look of and the price you're willing to pay. Then things like build difficulty and unique accessories come into consideration. As far as pricing goes, the Prime seems to pip the others slightly, at least in my research. If you were to buy a cockpit and triple monitor mount as seen here, without a seat, by my calculations it would cost you the following from each of the brands, without discounts. For a GT Omega Prime, it would cost £799 base price. For a Simlabs P1X, it would cost £827, which is pretty close, and they look very similar too. For a Trak Racer TR160, it would cost £1,008, which is quite a bit more. I've excluded seats from the equation for now to simplify things, as GT Omega's seat lineup is cheaper than the others and would skew things unfairly because they're not directly comparable like the rigs themselves are. This is just a sample selection, and there are cheaper rigs out there that use skinnier aluminium profile and numerous indie rigs to consider too, but I'm trying to compare rigs from the big names that in my eyes are directly comparable to the Prime. Discount links and codes also help make a dent in these prices. When I first laid eyes on the Prime, one thing did go through my head, which is that it looked a bit skinny in places, as in the pedal mounting plate and wheel deck looked a bit unsubstantial to me. It could have been the angles, could have just been me being harsh, maybe the use of a Logitech wheel and pedals in the product pages also play into that fear a bit, because nothing against Logitech, but aluminium profile rigs are intended for much harsher equipment than a Logitech wheel. I thought to myself that if I was having inklings of doubt, then perhaps other customers who were looking at the same thing might also be thinking this. The Prime deserved the chance then to prove my assumptions completely wrong, and as you're about to see and hear, I was indeed dead wrong about all of these concerns and ended up really impressed with the package as a whole. It's a lot beefier than it looks on the product pages. Having seen and handled it all up close, I would have complete confidence recommending the Prime to anyone. It's a grown-up piece of kit. And so the build. And by the way, a full cordless drill makes these jobs so much easier. If you don't have one of these in the house, you should. It'll save you bags of time building the Prime, and it will make you feel like a race car mechanic as you buzz each screw into the fixtures. Almost every single nut and bolt is accessible to a drill, and I was able to use one of these to tighten basically everything except the seat bolts. The Prime cockpit itself comes in 2 boxes, so too does the triple monitor mount. What could possibly beat taking receipt of a bunch of expensive feeling boxes, eh? With all the parts laid out, it's easy to get a picture of the task ahead. The profile pieces themselves have got more of a black satin finish to the coating than a full matte black, in case that's of any interest to you. My immediate attention focused on the pedal plate and brackets, which quickly put any doubts about them to rest. The pedal plate is probably the heaviest part, with reinforcement running through the centre of it and made of proper grown-up steel with a fold going around all the sides to add more strength. The wheel deck, which bridges the steering column pylons, is about as thick as a slice of bread and seems to be of aluminium construction, with the quality and substance of the brackets and parts actually quite higher than I expected. I was keen to get building. As the assembly progressed, one thing was clear: this rig sticks to the #1 rule: keep things simple. There's nothing unnecessary about the Prime's construction, nothing complicated or over-engineered, and the instruction manual is also unintimidating, clear to read and not prone to overthinking things. The pedal deck on the Prime is seriously simple to comprehend, literally 8 bolts involved in total, whereas the pedal plate on my old Trak Racer TR80 was almost like building a trebuchet. There's only a couple of variants of nuts and bolts used on the Prime. Most fixings comprise of the same nut, bolt and bracket combination across the whole rig, meaning that they can just supply you with one big bag of nuts and bolts. That's all you need. There's no need for the bolts to be separated into mini bags for each step, because it's just not that complicated. The wheel deck is mounted with 2 bolts on either side, which also doubles up as the guides, and it's really easy to get the ideal height and tilt for your wheel. Just loosen the bolts, move the entire wheel deck into the ideal position and tighten. No big brain stuff needed here. Once tight, there's no flex or movement. You'd probably need a micrometer to detect it if there was. Besides the wheel deck seen here, you do also have a choice of other wheel mounts when you order, such as side mounts or front mounts, to suit different direct drive wheelbases, offering similar to any other rig of this type. As is common with other brands as well, the monitor mount comes in 2 formats, standalone or integrated, in single, triple or quad screen configurations. I always tend to pick standalone so that I can move the triples well out of the way if I need to, but if you happen to have maybe a full motion rig or had the whole thing on wheels for easy transport, then integrated might be the better choice. The Prime monitor mount covers pretty much all screen sizes and includes extension arms to fit large format screens as standard, such as TVs. It's not something you have to pay extra for. The monitor brackets on the Prime can be swiveled, but they can't be pitched up or down. That's not something you usually require anyway, but my monitors themselves seemingly sagged a tiny amount, which meant they all pointed maybe 1 or 2 degrees downwards and couldn't be aligned by adjusting the brackets alone. But I solved this easily by sticking some folded card between the visor plate and the monitor and then tighten it back up. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best, so remember that one for when you're building it if you also have droopy monitors. With the finishing touches done, I could step back and I admired it, feeling like I had plenty of energy in reserve. I genuinely had a good time building this. The Prime is a rig that I can recommend to folks without having to warn them first. The Trak Racer TR80 I had previously made me feel like I had a duty to tell people to clear their schedule and get lots of sleep before they took it on. The Prime, by comparison, is a doddle to build, and I can't think of many ways that it could have been made any simpler really. The TR160 and P1X that I compare the Prime to don't look too far off in terms of simplicity, but the TR80 is my only other build experience, and so I draw comparisons to it. That thing was tough going. Now the easier build is a nice bonus, but a build only lasts for a day or two. Using the cockpit lasts many days, and that's what really matters. The Prime delivers what I would expect from a cockpit at this price and made of these materials. It's rock solid, there's zero discernible movement at the hands or feet, and if I was shopping for a grown-up direct drive base with 15, 18, 20 newton meters or more, I'd have no hesitation that the Prime would handle everything that could be thrown at it. Compared to my old ART cockpit, which was obviously a tube frame cockpit with some flex and some wobble, racing with the Prime gives you everything your equipment intended to transmit to you, with no dampening of the controls that I sometimes found in small measures with my old ART cockpit. But this is to be expected. This is the reason you often pay more than double for aluminium profile cockpits over tube frame cockpits. What we really want to know is whether any aspect of GC Omega's flagship cockpit is potentially compromised by the slightly lower price tag. And with my brutal head on, I can think of 1 or 2 things maybe that won't affect the majority, but could be important to know in some outlying cases. During filming, I noticed that the pedal tray has actually got a tiny amount of flex under braking. Now the Club Sport pedals shown here do have rubber soles that squish slightly under heavy forces, so don't focus on the movement of the pedal unit itself, it's actually by looking at the tray that you can see it deflects ever so slightly. Now I do use very stiff brake pedal compounds, so much so I need shoes to use it or it's unbearable, so I am putting a lot of force through this. The flex that seems to be there simply cannot be felt by feel alone for me, and I would never have guessed it was happening. It surprised me to see it, but the camera doesn't lie. Within that near 30 quid price difference between this and the Simlabs P1X, this is where the evidence for that price gap is most clear. This could be solved by using thicker gauge steel for the pedal tray or with more reinforcement, but either way, despite being much stronger than the ART pedal tray, it has room for improvement. The first comment is that the screw hole pattern in the pedal plate is restrictive in terms of lateral positioning, meaning you're pretty limited in how far left or right from the centre you can mount your pedals, which could be a deal breaker for some. By flipping the pedal deck around 180 degrees to offset things, you can give yourself some wiggle room, but it's still going to be pretty much in the centre. The only thing that needs to be changed to allow this is the screw hole pattern itself. It's just a design choice and not down to any cost saving measure, so it could be done without raising the price. Having said this, I don't have any issues with the positioning of my club swap pedals here, but if I did, then I'd probably have to drill extra holes. It's just steel plate after all, and I would be totally fine if I did this. The point is that it could be solved in pre-production, so if there's ever a Prime Mark II, it could improve on this with a minor redesign. Secondly, GT Omega currently only has recliner seats available in their range. At least at time of recording, this could easily change, being as the Prime signals GT Omega's intent to provide high-end kit. We'll have to wait and see. Recliner seats by their nature tend to flex more than a fixed bucket seat because of a recliner mechanism. It's not crazy amounts, but if you're trying to avoid flex or movement anywhere in a cockpit, then a bucket seat would serve you better. You do have complete freedom to mount any seat to the Prime if you want. You don't have to pick a GT Omega recliner seat. It's one of the many freedoms you get with an aluminium profile cockpit. Almost anything can be mounted to it. It's just that other seats and bucket seats tend to be far more expensive than GT Omega's recliner seats, which are amongst the lowest cost options you'll find, especially as they include a slider rail as well. All things considered, they are seriously cheaply priced seats. The seat I've got here is the RS9, which I've taken from my old ART cockpit and transferred over to the Prime. But if I didn't have a seat already, I would be tempted to get a reasonably priced bucket seat over anything else at this stage. In terms of aesthetics, the Prime is maybe not the most striking looking cockpit out there, with no branding to speak of anywhere on it. It's actually impossible to tell what brand cockpit it is without being shown a receipt. The Prime then is a bit of a blank canvas, and it's crying out for a small touch of personality that maybe a few simple stickers might provide. Then again, a blank canvas by definition is there for you to customise. You can put anything on your Prime and nobody would cry heresy that you deviated from the standard look. The vast majority of people will only ever buy one profile rig in their lifetime. So for what reasons would you choose the Prime over its rivals? Why did I pick the Prime over its rivals? Most profile rigs are really similar in function, so it really boils down to which one takes your fancy. A bit like choosing between a donut with pink icing and a donut with blue icing. They adhere to the same formula. For me, I chose the Prime because I'm already a bit of a GT Omega fan, if you couldn't already tell. I loved my ART cockpit, so they already have a little bit in the bank of goodwill for me. With the Prime being a fairly new contender from a UK brand with a decent price, I was up for giving it a try. One thing I do know from experience is that between the Prime and the Trak Racer TR80, which was the subject of this video, it's no contest. The Prime's easier to build, costs less, and feels a little bit sturdier. For me, I don't need anything more than this. A joy to build and a joy to use. It should impress you. Most importantly, it should make you feel like you've gotten what you've paid for. And yeah, you can crack open a cold one on it. And that's all I've got to say for now. Pop a comment below if you've got a Prime or are thinking of getting one. As always, feel free to ask any questions whatsoever, and I shall answer it if I can. Don't forget about the 5% discount link for GT Omega in the description to knock a bit off the price if you do head over to buy. And thanks again for watching. Cheers!